Estamos ao vivo e bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Don't Panic, It's Organic, o nosso primeiro de 2024. Eu sou o Felipe Bazon e hoje a gente vai falar sobre EEAT ou N.E.E.A.T., Killer Whale Update e também Semantic SEO com uma das pessoas que é uma entidade, se eu posso dizer assim, nesse segmento. Com vocês, Jason Barnard. Jason, welcome to the show once again. I was just doing a little intro in Portuguese, explaining the topics that we're going to talk about, saying that you are, in my opinion, the expert, the entity, I said, when it comes to branded SERPs, EEAT, and all things related to entities and semantic SEO. Jason, please, for those that don't know you yet, please could you introduce yourself and explain?
Well, you seem to have introduced me very well already. Yeah, I'm Jason Barnard. I've been focusing on how Google understands and represents entities, people, companies, podcasts, music albums, music groups, cartoon characters even, for the last 12 years. And I created Kalicube as a company 8 years ago to provide those services to businesses and people so that we can optimize how Google understands you and how it represents you to its audience. And in the last couple of years, it's gone much, much further, is that we have realized that when we educate Google correctly, we also clean up the funnel and create a full digital marketing strategy that works. Kalicube has solved digital marketing.
Oh, I love that slogan. And we were talking in the background about your experience with a digital marketing event. Maybe I'll pick your brain on that later. But let me go back a few years in time. I think that was 2006 when we first met. The first time I went to Brighton SEO and we did an interview in the first day of the event. Remember that you interviewed me for Kalicube? Do you recall that?
That would have been 2019, I think.
Oh, I think
not as early as 2006.
No, 2016, I think, or 17, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, you may well be right. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, because 19, I think it was the first time I spoke at Brighton, and the few years back, I think Fernando introduced from SEMrush introduced us, and I did an interview with them. They were building the stages there, the booths, and we did an interview in the afternoon, if I recall correctly. And since then, I've been a big follower of your work. You're a guy that enlightened me into this, how entity works, knowledge graphs, and so on. We're going to talk a lot about that. But could you explain how Kalicube evolved ever since? Because you guys became the go-to reference when it comes to knowledge graph, understanding the entities. Could you go a little bit deeper into explaining what you guys do and how you guys are solving digital marketing, if you will?
Well, I built Kalicube Pro, which is our SaaS platform for automating what we call the Kalicube process. So the Kalicube process is the way that we educate Google, but also we get Google to teach us what's right and wrong about a digital strategy. And the Kalicube process is the implementation of Google's critique of your digital strategy. And it's hugely powerful. The problem I've had since 2015 when I built the platform is Google wasn't able to do everything I expected it to do. And this year with the Killer Whale update that you mentioned, Google finally caught up with me. 2013 was the year that Google could actually do what I thought it could do in 2015, but it actually couldn't. So the machine was 8 years ahead of its time. We intend at the Kalicube team to keep Kalicube Pro, the SaaS platform, 8 years ahead at all times. So our aim now is to keep working to make the platform perform for today, of course, but also be ready to perform tomorrow when tomorrow happens. So the thing about last year was the SGE, generative AI and search, caught everybody flat-footed, except Kalicube, because we were ready 8 years ago.
That's amazing.
And the other evolution that you might have missed is 3 years ago, I was completely alone. Kalicube was just Jason. And today, Kalicube is 24 people working towards the aim of educating Google, helping business owners and people to both learn from Google and educate it. But most of all, and this is something that struck me this year, is we can remove the fear of digital marketing, the digital world, generative AI in search, and make it simple and effective using data, but also an incredibly simple, straightforward business sense digital marketing strategy. And I'm really, really happy about that. Being able to remove the fear and give people confidence when faced with all of the changes that are happening is something I'm really, really, really keen to maintain.
Well, I must say that I didn't know you guys were with as many people as you are now, growing as you are. So well done on that front. Congratulations. You do an exceptional job. I follow your work, so I knew you were started back then when we first talked. You were kind of like one-man band, and then now I saw you doing all this content and your newsletter. A lot of things happening, so I do follow up, and I'm happy to know that I'm like Google. Back then, I didn't understand what Kalikib was when we first met, and now it makes total sense. You know, your process, everything that you guys are doing. That said, am I correct in understanding or interpreting that now Google is being able to analyze all the expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness of your brand, of your online presence? Is that what you're trying to say, that Google can do that algorithmically with the assistance of maybe the quality raters? Am I correctly interpreting that? And all the things that you were predicting, you can now do for companies. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at let's just say credibility. Credibility used to be just links. Google would count links and it would say that's a credible source because it's got lots of links, and the links come from sites that also have lots of links. So it's a super easy system to game, and people have gamed it for years. PageRank is the gameable part, but credibility now goes way beyond just links. Links are still part of it, but if they were 100% of it 5 years ago, now let's say they're 10%. So anybody who's focusing purely on links is going to be in trouble very quickly. And the reason for that is there are so many other credibility signals that Google can now use, which is expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And it can find that anywhere in your digital ecosystem. And it can find it if it can identify you when you get a mention. So what we used to call linkless links. So if somebody on a website, let's say SEMrush, says Jason Barnard is an expert in digital marketing, that's a third party corroborating the fact that I'm an expert in digital marketing. If Google doesn't understand who Jason Barnard is, that's pointless. Doesn't help. If it doesn't understand which Jason Barnard, because there are 300 in the world, then it's also useless. So it needs to understand not only Jason Barnard, but this particular named entity, Jason Barnard. So what I need to do is educate Google that a mention of Jason Barnard on SEMrush that talks about digital marketing is this one. Mm-hmm. And a mention of a music expert on a podcast site is the Jason Barnard in the UK who has a music podcast. So that perspective of saying, well, credibility is expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. How do we make sure that Google understands that it's talking about me with all of these credibility signals, the reviews, the user comments, this podcast? Philippe Bazon has invited Jason Barnard. Luckily, he invited the right one, not the podcaster about music, but the digital marketer, and we're talking about the right topic. And those credibility signals, as you can imagine, are significantly more intricate and more important than just links, and impossible to game completely. Then you mentioned N.E.E.A.T., which is the new Kalikib special word, is that we realize that Google also takes into account notability. So you have an N at the start. And notability is not what Wikipedia says notability is. In Wikipedia, notability is about being famous. In Google's mind, notability is being important and recognized within your industry, within your niche, and that can be industry and geo-region. So if I'm an expert just in the UK, then I can be notable in the UK, and that's hugely important to Google. And Google can figure this out to such a microscopic degree that I could actually just be the Jason Barnard who is notable for digital marketing in Birmingham. That's all possible. And then there's another aspect, which is the double T at the end. So you have trustworthiness. You also have transparency. If you're not transparent,
so NEET is N-E-E-A-T. So guys, you're hearing firsthand for the Brazilian audience. People all over the world had read Jason's Kalicube article, I believe so. I read it, but I missed the double T at the end. So it's notability, experience, expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness, and transparency.
Yep.
Guys, this is huge here. First time I think the Brazilian audience is hearing about that. So pay attention to what it's going to complement now, guys. Go on, Jason. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, and transparency, to give credit where credit's due, that's Jano van Dreel, who's a Dutch SEO, who's a super expert in schema markup. We'll talk about him later on as well.
From WordLift, right?
No, he doesn't work with WordLift. He's an independent contractor.
Okay.
But he's super smart. And if you want to know anything about schema markup, that's the guy to ask. But he helps Kalicube. He's helping us with our schema markup. He's giving me the really neat tips and tricks that he knows works because he talks to the Google engineers who are involved in schema.org. So he actually knows what Google do take into account, and he's part of that conversation at all times. And then Kalicube added notability. And the one thing I really do, and I'll say it again, I have to stress it, notability is not what Wikipedia says it is. You do not need a Wikipedia page to demonstrate your notability. You can be notable at a regional industry level, and you can be notable within a very small group of people, and it still makes sense to Google because it can manage with the astonishingly powerful algorithms and data sets it's got. It can analyze to an incredibly small degree somebody who is notable or a company that's notable. But the really important thing about N.E.E.T. is that Google cannot apply the signals that it has unless it understands your entity explicitly. And that's going to come back in the killer whale update when we talk about that.
That is just answer the question I was going to ask you regarding the brand mentions. No, it's good because I think it will complement, because I was going to ask you. So a lot is being talked about the brand mentions are the new links or the new way to build links, or they have the same weight. But that doesn't work if you're not an entity recognized by the knowledge graph. Exactly. So first of all, became a notable entity within the knowledge graph, and then those brand mentions will start working, correct?
Yes, that's exactly it. Be an entity, and you said notable, but I would argue it's actually confidently understood. Being understood is one thing.
Yeah, okay.
But confidence in Google's mind is vastly underrated by people. So you can get yourself to be understood, and people think, well, that's job done. I'm in the knowledge graph and I've got my knowledge panel. But in fact, they should be continuing to work because they want to build that confidence over time. And as you said, notability, that's why we added it back in, because PR is going to build you notability. And those signals become increasingly powerful as you become more notable within your industry. But the foundation is being understood as a named entity, that Google clearly understands that when there is a brand mention, that brand mention is you. And don't ever forget that ambiguity is a huge problem, especially with people's names.
I think even sometimes brands, we at Hedgehog I've discovered that there are another 4 or 5 digital agencies that are called Hedgehog. 2 in the US, one obviously us being in Brazil and the UK, but I think there's 2 in the US and 1 in Australia. So we just, with the help of the Knowledge Graph Explorer from Kalicube, I was able to identify our entity, claim the knowledge panel, and we are on our way to building that notability. On that front, what's the difference between, because in my mind, they're very close together, notability and authoritativeness. So because if you're an authority, you're notable. I don't know. My mind works that way. So could you maybe explain the difference between those two?
I can see that they are very similar. Being an authority is that people listen to you when you speak, and they believe you. Being notable could be that people listen to me, but they don't believe me. They don't trust me.
Got it.
simply because they see me all over the place. So there is a difference. And so notability is more famousness. And I'll give you a really good example of, I mean, the mentions that you were talking about earlier on. We track the Beatles. And the reason we track the Beatles is 2 of them are alive and 2 of them are unfortunately deceased. And then they all have the commonality of being in the Beatles. So you have 4 people, 1 group. Mm-hmm. What happens with the knowledge graph is every time there is a news cycle about one of the Beatles, the confidence score goes up. That's notability. It's not authority.
Got it. Perfect.
And for example, one point, I think it was in July, the confidence score in the knowledge graph went up significantly for the Beatles because it was the Beatles' anniversary in June. So there is also a delay from one to the other. Then John Lennon, the anniversary of his death was in December. And so you tend to get an increase in the confidence score for John Lennon in January. Because there's so much news about it, once again, famousness, not necessarily authoritativeness.
That's interesting. On that front, Paul McCartney did a show here in Maracanã, the most famous football stadium in Brazil, that he did, I think, 30 or 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And now he did it again. So that also counted towards notability of Paul McCartney, right? It was on, they did a live coverage on Disney Plus and so on, the streaming channel. Wow. And so I think all that counted. So on that front, so people understand.
Just really quickly, because often we talk about people like Paul McCartney, who's hugely famous, and everyone thinks, well, I can't do that. Always remember, at your micro level, you can be notable. So you just need to scale it all down to something that resembles your market and yourself. And you can be as famous as Paul McCartney within your little niche. And that's good enough.
Perfect. And to explain a little bit further for people about these ambiguities, the Beatles is the band, the Beatles can be the Volkswagen car, and the Beetle can be an insect. So it's utterly important that you tell Google, obviously Google before that was able to understand all these things, but this is how you reason or resolve ambiguity, correct? So using the entity in the knowledge graph to tell Google that you are the Beatles, the band, not the car, nor the insect, correct?
And there's a subtlety there that people often overlook is you say the Beatles with a capital T and a capital B, it's obvious we're talking about the band. Whereas the Beatles with a small t and a B-E-E is the Beatles, the car, with a capital B. So the capitalization is hugely important. The capitalization means this is a proper noun, it's a thing. And it's a clue that Google is desperately searching for all the time. And people who capitalize badly are going to be badly understood. The other thing that I think people don't talk about enough is that Google looks at interpretations. So ambiguity. How does the public interpret this term? And it uses the example in the quality rater guidelines of Apple. Apple, the company, is the dominant interpretation. Therefore, the result for Apple will be mostly Apple, the company. Apple, the fruit, is actually just a common interpretation. So they will include it because you might be looking for that, but it's simply a common interpretation, and therefore less people are looking for it than Apple, the company. And then Apple, the person's name or the town name, is a minor interpretation. So when you're looking at ambiguity, you need to consider as well, am I talking about the principal interpretation, the common interpretation, or the minor interpretation? And that's going to change how the brand SERP looks. And so, for example, if you're a company who's called yourself what you do, car leasing limited, you're going to really struggle to be the dominant interpretation there. And you need to work very, 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 very hard. So all of these companies that called themselves what they did because it worked in the old traditional SEO are now going to be struggling. But if you can master it like Apple did, you're going to be winning all the way. But that's a huge amount of PR you need to do. You need to be super notable in order to be able to become the dominant interpretation.
And therefore, own your branded SERP, which is my next question. You are known as you guys can see under his tagline here, the Brand SERP Guy. Jason, how important is that please explain the concept of branded SERP or brand SERP, and how important it is for us moving forward in this world of entities and knowledge graphs and making Google understand all these connections between needs and so on?
Yeah, it's a great question. The brand SERP is actually the KPI for Google's understanding of you. I.e., if you have a really solid brand SERP that represents your company with the brand narrative that you have chosen, that you're communicating across your digital ecosystem, then Google has understood who you are, what you do, for whom you are useful, and why you're better than the competition. It's also a way to measure and understand what's right and wrong with your digital strategy. So if it's a complete mess and it doesn't reflect your brand message, what's going on? Google has misunderstood. And when Google misunderstood, it's your fault. And a lot of people say, well, Google should just understand. And that's foolishly letting go and just saying, oh, I give away all responsibility for this to Google. Help Google by educating Google. Educating Google involves improving your digital ecosystem, improving your brand message across your entire digital ecosystem, which means improving the brand message that people, your audience, are seeing all the way down the funnel. So in fact, by looking at the brand SERP to understand, correcting the brand SERP to make it look perfect, you're creating an incredibly good funnel for people and also an incredibly good understanding for Google. And you can just use that brand SERP as the representation of Google's understanding of the world's opinion of you, which is actually the best measurement you can come up with, because Google is the biggest machine that sees the most things going on, and its judgment of you is actually its judgment of the world's opinion of you. Oh, and the cherry on the cake is that people searching your brand name who are bottom of funnel about to do business with you see a really perfect brand SERP, and it looks like a recommendation from the machine that they trust. They use Google because they trust it. When Google represents you incredibly positively, incredibly accurately, and incredibly convincingly, when somebody Googles your brand name, you've got the recommendation from the best, biggest, most trusted search engine in the world.
Amazing. And you are, back in the first time I met you and we talked, you mentioned something to me that I use it up until this day, that your brand SERP is your new business card for your name and for your brand, obviously. If you recall my first talk when I was in Brighton SEO, I remember you were on the stage and I did mention you because I said, I just put my name. If you want to know a little bit more about me, just Google my name. That's my business brand. And I saw you on the audience, and I said, I learned that with my good friend Jason Barnard. And I don't know if you remember that, but I've been using that ever since, and people find it brilliant up until this day, like 6-7 years, 5 years ahead of what the first time I did that. I always start my talks saying, if you want to know a bit more about me, Google it. If you want to know a bit more about Hedgehog, just Google it. That's our business card. And it saves a lot of time in talks because, to be honest, I can't stand people that spend 10 minutes talking about how their MBAs and this and that. And that is, I want to talk. I want to see what you have to. I know you're good because you're on stage. So go ahead. So that saved me a lot of time. And you know what? It inspired people to search for your name, which, if correct me if I'm wrong, it's a signal that inspire Google to see that you are trustworthy. Like the more searches about your brand, the more searches about your name. Does that count towards what? Notability, authoritativeness? Where does the number of searches for your brand or for your name increases your confidence level in the EEAT or the NEET score? Let's say
which is a brilliant question. It's going to be mostly notability, but what you'll find with all of the aspects of NEET is that the signals will often touch on multiple. If somebody's searching my name, I'm notable. If somebody's searching my name, presumably they see me as an expert, especially if they associate it with a word within my industry. So if they search for Jason Barnard digital marketing, immediately Google is seeing that as a signal that I am an expert. The other really, really important thing, I mean, the volume of branded search is hugely important. We're with Sarah Mokansea, we're working on pulling the data to demonstrate what we've seen manually, just doing spot checks, that when branded search goes up, the volume of branded searches goes up, the SEO performance follows in the year after. I mean, we've seen it on individual cases. Now we're pulling the data for, I mean, we're not sure yet, maybe 6,000 brands.
Interesting.
To demonstrate that branded search will drive SEO.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to those results, because that is just going to put, from my end now, the cherry on the cake, or the icing on the cake, for something that I've been talking a lot. Why SEO needs to be included in the mix of marketing. It's definitely a discipline that it needs to be that, and it connects with branding. So the more you inspire people to search for your brand, the better your SEO performance will be. So
100%.
Please send me that data when you have it, because I really want to delve into it and use it in my presentations.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd love to point out is all credit to Sarah Mokansea. I mean, she comes in, she helps out at Calicube, and she's been talking to me about this for ages. And I say, I know it's true. How do we get the data? And she's super smart and is coming in, getting the data. We've got Damri and Elisa working on it too. And I hope that the data we pull will prove what we're saying, what I've been seeing. And I say hope. I'm very sure it's going to work. It's going to demonstrate exactly what we're talking about. I can't see that there's going to be any other result. That said, the data will speak. I can't speak ahead of time. But the other important thing is the Calicube process, which is an entire digital marketing strategy built around teaching Google and learning from Google, which is lovely. And it's all about branding, marketing, and SEO in that order. If you have a brand, then you have something to market. If you have marketing content, package it for Google. That's all SEO is. It's packaging marketing content that you should be creating anyway for Google.
And that said, I think finally, I think I'm going to coin a phrase here. Let's see how it's going to shape up. SEO will not die, but will be finally incorporated to the marketing department, because it will be, if brand inspires searches will make you rank higher or improve your SEO performance, will finally come out of the basement and be moved into the marketing department. Finally.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I really like that approach. And if you look at it from an SEO perspective, a lot of SEOs focus very much on the website. They focus on that thing that we control. And what they haven't kept up with is universal search is about your entire digital ecosystem. So you necessarily need to get involved in all of the different marketing strategies. And if you can, how can I put it? If you can suppress your pride and accept that SEO is packaging, SEO is making this content that should be there anyway, digestible and understandable for Google, then you have a very powerful situation. You say to everybody on the team, when you create marketing materials that you know will work and will pay for themselves already in and of themselves within the context you've created it for the audience, give it to me so I can package it. Then Google will give us the natural extension of this amazing content. And I was writing an article for Search Engine Land today, and it starts with Google. How often have you heard from a Google representative, create content for people, not machines? It sounds and it feels like this incredibly trite, unhelpful comment that has no substance to it. But then if you look at it and work through it with the Calicube process, what you'll find is if you focus on branding, marketing, and then package for SEO, that's exactly what you're doing. And if you focus on the marketing across your entire digital ecosystem, you've got an incredibly consistent, incredibly efficient, incredibly profitable funnel. And we haven't even started talking about Google yet. And you're making money and you're getting people down the funnel. And Google then becomes, I would call it a bonus, but I get told off by Leanne because she says it's a natural extension of what you should be doing anyway. And it helps you to clean up everything you're doing so that it makes sense to everyone, people, search engines, and indeed your business.
And this is, if you look into the bylines of what Google says, or the small letters, it's always telling you, don't do SEO. Just focus on your brand, your marketing. So this is, I think that's the SEO of the future, if I may say. Yep. Just, build your brand, build a good website, and don't even bother sending your websites to Google via Google Search Console or a sitemap or anything. Let Google find you. If Google finds you and understand your notability, your experience, your expertise, your authoritativeness, blah, 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 you're just going to rank. So focus on your marketing and your branding. And I think that's the, if we are to evaluate an SEO campaign from now on, that's it. What you have done in SEO, nothing. But I built a very good brand, a website with a very good experience, and I have a lot of experts writing content. I'm helping people solve problems, and I have a state-of-the-art product. Apple, for instance. I doubt Apple do any SEO. They just have what they have, right?
Yeah. Added to that, I also have my content in the places where my audience naturally hangs out, which isn't necessarily my website. I am always standing where my audience is looking. My marketing materials indicate to them that I have the solution to their problem, indicate to them what the next steps are. And that's what Google is looking for across your entire digital ecosystem. Are you standing where your audience is looking? Are you demonstrating to them that you have the solution, that you're the best solution, and are they coming down your funnel? And if all of that fits together, Google can match the subset of its users who are your audience to you when you're going to be useful and valuable to them.
This talk is becoming not about the killer way update, killer way of update. That my tongue's not working correctly today. The killer way update, but how the SEO of the future will shape up, right? Yep. How it should be. This is amazing. Yep. But Jason, still on the branded SERP or the brand SERP, a lot of people are listening to us and saying, "Hang on, I already rank first for my brand name." Yeah. It's much more than that, right? Can you elaborate on that? And if I may complement or guide your answer here, which I don't want you to do it, is the first step to controlling your brand SERP, acquiring or getting your knowledge panel approved.
Right.
Or let's start with the brand. Yeah, go on.
No. The knowledge panel isn't
the expert.
The knowledge panel isn't the first step, but what I can do is read a brand SERP and tell you immediately where you need to focus first. And it can sometimes be the knowledge panel. But I look immediately at the top. Now, you rank number one, you're happy, that's all you're thinking about. But do you have rich site links? If you don't have rich site links, you have a structural problem within your website, or you have the pages that are key to engagement and the transparency that Google is looking for and your users, your audience are looking for. You have problems with those pages, the contact page, the about page, the login page, pages we typically don't think about in SEO. These are transparency pages. Then as you go down your brand SERP, you'll be seeing social media platforms. You're going to be seeing 2 or 3. Those are the ones that Google sees as the most relevant to your audience. Are they the ones you expect? And are they the ones that your competitors have? Are those the ones that your market needs? Are they ones that your audience is actually hanging out on? So if your entire market has Instagram ranking, but you've got LinkedIn ranking, you have a problem with your social media strategy. You're putting all your beans in the wrong social media platform. Then you can also look at reviews. Have I got a review platform ranking? Are they good reviews? Is it the right one for my market? You can also look at the different rich elements. The video boxes, if I'm investing in video, am I investing correctly and wisely? If I'm investing in video and video boxes do not appear on my brand SERP, then I'm investing badly, because my audience are almost certainly not engaging with the videos in the way that Google would expect, which means that Google then judges them to be not helpful for a brand SERP and will not rank them. Images, the same thing. People also ask are hugely interesting. If you look at people also ask, what are the questions people are asking about my company? And are there questions in that list that are generic that I should be answering as in priority? But sometimes the people also ask is not questions people are actually asking. It's simply Google knows the answer to the question, so it puts the question and the answer there because it's so pleased with them itself for having understood. So if you search for Calicube, the question is, what is the Calicube process? pretty sure very few people ask that question, but Google sees it as associated with Kalicube. So you're starting to see that it's matching a topic and a question with my entity brand. If you search for Jason Barnard, you will see who is the Brand SERP guy. It understands that the follow-up question to Jason Barnard is the Brand SERP guy. It used to be, who is Boowa, which was the blue dog in the cartoon. That was the most relevant thing. And that's hugely important as well, is that I've repositioned myself in Google's brain from a cartoon screenwriter and actor to a digital marketing specialist. And that's how I started with Brand SERPs, is because Google used to say Jason Barnard is a cartoon blue dog, and that doesn't get you very many clients when you're trying to sell digital marketing.
Not at all, I believe.
And then the knowledge panel is something that everybody should have. And people think, well, I don't have a Wikipedia page, I'm not famous, I need famousness, I need notability. You don't. Anybody can get a knowledge panel. And on that aspect, it's actually quite interesting that Mary-Ann, who works at Kalicube, who's been at Kalicube for a little over 2 years now, has a knowledge panel. But she only has 3 social media accounts and 1 mention on the Kalicube website. So she has a very small digital footprint, and yet she has a knowledge panel because Google understands and is confident it's understood, because she cleaned up that very small digital footprint incredibly well, and she's incredibly clear. And she's mentioned on an authoritative site, kalicube.com. So becoming an authoritative site, in fact, sorry, I'll come back on that. She's mentioned by an authoritative brand that is represented by kalicube.com, the website. And it's really important in the quality rater guidelines. Google now talk about website owner and not website. They're looking for the owner of the website. The website is simply a representation of the brand or the company or the person behind it. And in the quality rater guidelines, they're also looking for the author of the content, which will bring us into the killer whale update, I think, quite neatly. And that understanding as an entity, as a person, allows it to attribute articles to people. If you think about it, attributing articles to a brand, if you've understood which the website itself and the brand that owns the website, it's easy. But people write for multiple different platforms and generally don't have a personal website. So identifying authors of content is hugely difficult. And the killer whale solved that problem for Google, or was at least the start of the solution to that problem.
Got it. So let's dive into the killer whale update. I'm gonna nail that one the last time. So the killer whale update, what was that all about? And could you provide a bit of context so people understand a bit how you guys are monitoring the knowledge graph and all these entities and how that came along, how the explanation for that?
I've been tracking the knowledge graph since 2015, and every December and July, there is a huge update to the knowledge graph that nobody notices, as far as I know, because I'm the only person tracking it. Or Kalicube is the only company now tracking it. And we track 4,000 entities every day and 100,000 entities every month. We have 8 million knowledge graph IDs, i.e. entities in the knowledge graph. We have a list of 8 million that go back right now in the database only to 2019, but I've got the cold storage of the other 4 years, but we don't need it anymore. That time has passed. There's no point in thinking about it anymore. But every July and every December, I look for an update. What's the update this time? December, we just had one. Right. But the big one was in July. And over 4 days, the number of person entities in the knowledge graph tripled.
Jeez.
And if you imagine that the knowledge graph now contains 50 billion entities,
whoa,
that's a huge change. And in just 4 days. Number one, Google tripled the number of person entities, but didn't increase the number of corporation entities or the number of song entities or the number of music group entities. So it was purely focused on people. Number two is it stripped away a huge number of subtitles. So Jason Barnard, CEO of Kalicube, Philippe Bazin, CEO of Hedgehog Digital, Bill Gates, entrepreneur, I'm trying to think, Lily Ray, let's say, writer, a musician. I think she's a musician.
DJ.
DJ. And it stripped them away, except for writers and authors. So it was focusing on writers and authors and reclassifying everything and setting the bar for confidence in terms of at what point the algorithm can attribute a subtitle to somebody much higher than it was before. So they reclassified people. They reclassified people with a focus on writers and authors in particular, which already is going to give you the idea of where we're going with this. What was interesting is that happened in July, and then the helpful content update in September, guess what happened? A huge number of knowledge panels suddenly appeared. And a huge number of knowledge panels with the subtitle writer or author. So what Google did was updated the knowledge graph in July. That's all internal. Didn't reflect it in the SERPs until September, at which point Gary Irish said a huge part of the September update is classification. We've improved our classification. We saw that in the knowledge graph 2 months before. So what they've done is they've reclassified people looking for authors because they want to be able to attribute pieces of content to people. And that's hugely difficult for them to do. But now they can recognize 3 times more people and a lot more authors.
Got it.
So there are 2 things at least going on here. Number one is if we can identify the author of the content, we can apply all and any N.E.E.T.T signals that we find, because we've understood the entity, the person who's created this content, and we can evaluate through mentions, through the qualifications, the awards they've got, whether or not they are authoritative, whether they're expert, whether they've got experience. If we understand their career, we can understand if they're experienced. If we can understand all of the different content they've written, we can immediately see that they're experienced because they've written so much content. Are they authoritative? Is this person being applauded by his or her peers? Other people in the industry. If people in the industry keep mentioning my name, I'm immediately going to become authoritative. Am I being mentioned on media sites? Notability. Obviously, in order for Google to understand this and to be able to trawl through all this, we need to be transparent. That's point number one. If you're understood as an entity, Google can apply all and any N.E.E.T.T signals, whatever they may be, fully. If it doesn't understand your entity, it simply can't. Point number two, which Marianne on the Calicube team pointed out to me, is that now they will be able to attribute content to people. It means that the AI-generated content can be put to one side if they have a better or an alternative written by a real human being that they recognize. So theoretically, and we don't know where this is going, if you generated a piece of AI content about brand SERPs and SEO, whatever, and I wrote one, Google would say, well, all things equal, as long as they both bring enough value, we're going to prioritize Jason's, because we know it's a human being and we know that it's real expertise, experience, authoritativeness, trustworthiness, credibility.
Got it.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, yeah. So the Killer Way update had a direct impact on the helpful content update of September.
Yes.
Where
that's
Google...
the first time I've ever seen a knowledge graph update then being replicated or being used or being visibly and undeniably present in a core update. And for me, that's huge. And the other thing is when we've discovered the Killer Whale update, I've been in SEO since 1998. I started when Google started. I've seen every iteration of Google. I've grown up with Google in my career. This is by far the biggest update I have ever seen, the most visible one that's made the most difference.
That's amazing. And the thing is, I'm connecting the dots in my head here now. So
just like Google.
Yes.
That's what a knowledge graph does.
Exactly. That's where I'm heading. So would you say that the way to optimize, to start optimizing, if I may say that, optimizing for your N.E.E.T score. Let's call it N.E.E.T score to make things easier. We don't keep saying all those 5 massive words all the time.
The N.E.E.T score.
First step, become a recognized entity within the knowledge graph, and then work on those 6 letters or whatever on the N.E.E.T score. Your notability, authoritativeness or transparency and so on. So am I correct in saying that? So this is the killer whale update proves that, correct?
Yes.
That
Absolutely.
Google's the correlation between the killer whale with the helpful content and the need signals. That's where you need to start. So first of all, become an entity. So I have people thinking, watching us. I'm seeing the future here when I publish the video. How do I become a recognized entity within the knowledge graph?
Right. It's actually really simple. You need a web page on your website that represents the entity. So one web page that represents one entity. So it's the about page for a company, or on my website, it can be my homepage or the about page. You then need to describe clearly who you are, what you do, which audience you serve, and why you're credible. You need to link out all of the different resources that prove what you're saying is true.
Got it.
So you lay out your story to Google, and then you point it to the corroboration. Of course, on the web, everybody's digital ecosystem is a mess. So we have CaliQ Pro, the SaaS platform that agencies use to crawl Google's results to figure out what are the knowledge sources, which are the most important knowledge sources for any individual entity. And then you go around in order of importance and you correct everything so that the message Google is receiving is incredibly consistent. You can add schema markup, but it's not necessary. And that's a mistake a lot of people make. They think it's all about schema. It's not. It's about a consistent message and accurate information across your entire digital ecosystem. And then what happens is Google will go in an infinite loop of self-corroboration. So it goes from your website, sees the information, you point it to LinkedIn, it sees the same information, it comes back. You point it then to Wikidata, it sees the same information, it comes back. You then point it to Crunchbase, it comes back, it sees the same information, comes back, and so on and so forth. So this machine, which is in essence a child trying to learn everything about you, is a child that learns by pure repetition. And like a child, if there are contradictions, it will get confused. And it will, once again, it will lose confidence in what it thinks it's understood. The more consistent you are, and the more corroboration you get from relevant, authoritative, and trustworthy sources, and that doesn't mean website, it means brands and other entities that Google recognizes, the better you will build that entity. And what you will have noticed there is by going around all of these different sources, correcting everything and adding additional information, you will naturally be adding yourself proof of your expertise, authoritativeness, notability, and trustworthiness. And the transparency as well, because it will be very clear that you're being very transparent and open with Google and indeed your audience. And that's the point. Google's trying to measure as well how you interact with your audience. And if you're not transparent with your audience, that doesn't look good, does it? So
yeah, definitely not.
As you build that digital ecosystem, or you clean up the digital ecosystem, you will naturally be amplifying the signals that contribute to N.E.E.T. And by creating the entity, you will then doubly amplify them because Google will then be able to apply them to you. And from there on in, I had a client asking me the other day, he said he spent $20,000 building knowledge panels with snake oil salesmen. And he's hugely disappointed because they keep disappearing. And he said, all of it was SEO. And I said, well, that's the point. This is much closer to PR than it is to SEO. It's a PR strategy packaged for Google. So we're back to that idea of SEO is just packaging for Google. Focus on the PR, focus on demonstrating your N.E.E.T. credentials, package it for Google so it can understand, become an entity so that it can apply them.
I believe the concept you use when you mention that you need to have your home page or your page with the information about you is the entity home, correct?
Yes.
How I've noticed that, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I didn't notice you before. You had your jasonbarnard.com, and now you have this website. That's your entity home. But what's the weight between a domain with your name that becomes your entity home, or just a page within your website? For instance, in my case, I'm building my entity home on my About Us page, or an About Us page, or About Me page on Hedgehog. That can be my entity home. Is there is it more effective to have a domain in your name, or it can be within my brand, because that will correlate to Hedgehog and that will help both in becoming more neat, let's say it.
Right. Well, when clients come on board with Kalicube, with Elisa, who works on building entity understanding in Google's brain for our clients, the first thing we do for people is build them a 2-page website.
Got it.
Because that entity home belongs to them as a human being, as a person. Otherwise, it belongs to their company, and the company and the person are two very different things. Google is much more comfortable having one entity per website when it's a cornerstone entity, such as a person, the CEO of a company, or the company itself. Pages for products can be entity homes. So you need to identify which are the really important entities, and the really important entities should have their own website. And for a person, that website can be a homepage and an about page. That also means that the entity home, Google will often show the homepage, but it will actually read the about page for the information. So that's a little bit kind of confusing, but you don't want the homepage to be where you're going to say all the boring stuff about who you are and link out to all these different sources. You want to do that in the about page and keep the homepage for sharing the wonderful things that you have to share with your audience as a person or as a company. And what we've seen is that Google may represent your entity home in the knowledge panel using the homepage, but it's actually reading the about page. And you should have your schema markup and all the links and all the information on the about page. You don't need to worry about the homepage because Google makes that connection. And the entity home is the single most important thing by far. It's not schema markup. It isn't even the description or even famousness. It's, does Google understand where your entity lives online? Does it understand that that description of you is trustworthy? At that point, you can start building whatever you want, and you can pretty much get Google to say whatever you want about yourself. And as an example, at one point, I got it to say that Jason Barnard played bass on the Ace of Spades, which of course I didn't. That was Lemmy Kilmister.
Yeah. Motorhead.
Yes, Motorhead, of course. And it's simply because Google trusts me so much about myself that it's willing to repeat anything I say. I once got it to say that I played the ukulele when in fact I played the double bass. So I can basically get Google to jump through hoops pretty much at will. And to be really fair, Elisa, who is the Kalicube Pro team lead, who uses Kalicube Pro for our agencies and for our clients, is better at this than I am now. The student has surpassed the master, and she's done that in just 2 years.
There you are. Well,
which is stunning.
You taught her very well. I definitely know. Yeah. I learned a lot from you. From all the time that the times we met in the Brighton SEO, I think the other years that followed up, talking with you, the chat we had a few years here in Don't Panic, It's Organic as well. I learned a lot with you from that. You are my go-to reference when it comes to brand SERPs, knowledge graphs, and panels and entities and so on. I imagine her working alongside with you. She's just like absorbing everything. But going back to you mentioned structured data. A lot of people talk about entity SEO and semantic SEO, and definitely structured data plays an important role. So am I correct in saying or thinking that structured data is not necessarily essential for you to become an entity, a recognized entity within the knowledge graph, but it is how you can manipulate the information fed into Google that will shape up your brand SERP? No.
Right. Well, we'll come back to Jarno van Driel, who is the super duper schema expert. I mean, he treats schema markup like a language, and he says, I can speak schema. And if you ask him, he can just write it off the top of his head, pretty much anything. Huge respect for Jarno. And he and I have been chatting for the last 6 or 7 months. And what has come out of the conversation is that he does explicit semantics, i.e. he can explain something using schema markup, Google's native language, if we like, so that Google can immediately understand it and be very confident it's understanding. And that confidence comes back again. What we do at Kalicube is what he calls implicit semantics. is that you take away all the schema markup, you create a page, you link and you repeat, and you're consistent with the message, and everything you write, everything you communicate is designed to be easily understood by Google. You literally don't need the schema markup because we've done implicit semantics. And the explicit semantics without the implicit semantics simply won't work long term. Because if the schema markup says one thing, but the rest of the web disagrees or contradicts or has inconsistencies, this will just fall off. So you need implicit semantics first and foremost, and then you can represent those implicit semantics with the explicit semantics of schema markup.
Got it. Very, very interesting. Now that
Isn't
you're
that
talking
cool?
about, yeah, it is super, super interesting. Now, my mind was going like, here, I have loads to analyze and talk to my brain about this and put into place. But as you're talking about Jono, I met him in St. Petersburg. Now, I was confusing him with Andrea Volpini from WordLift. I met him in St. Petersburg. He was just moving from Distill to Yoast. He was the one that created the whole schema library for Yoast, correct? I do recall when he was doing that, and he had the feedback from the guys from on Twitter from Google that were doing all the structured data from Google and so on. Yeah. Fantastic.
No, there's still a slight confusion. Jono, who worked at Yoast and has now left Yoast, is a genius.
Yes.
But I'm talking about Jarno, Jarno van Driel, who's a Dutch guy that nobody has heard of.
All right. Okay. So yes.
So
the names is very similar. It's all the guys.
Andrea Volpini, WordLift works with Calicube. They're partners with Calicube. Jono Alderson has helped me multiple times. He's a super smart, super lovely guy. Jarno van Driel. Those are the three people in the world who are truly, truly experts in schema markup for SEO.
Thank you. I just updated my knowledge graph now. So the ambiguity. Oh, good. Amazing.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I mean, it's slightly out of place, but I really wanted to get it in. Is the Killer Whale update where Google is actively looking for authors. We have proof that that's what it was doing, because at one point it attributed one of Barry Schwartz's articles to me. In my articles carousel, it was Barry Schwartz's article that appeared. Why? Because it was an article that he hadn't put his bio at the bottom of, and mine was the first bio of the related articles section. So Google took the first author it recognized and attributed the article to me. So they are dynamically attributing articles when there is no signature.
So that's very interesting, because
it's lovely.
If you have a blog that don't have like an attributed author to it, it could be messed up even with your competitors, let's say, and then be attributed to your competitors, and then you're losing all your reputation. I don't know, just going very AO here, but yeah, it could happen. I don't know.
and it indicates, or it shows and demonstrates that Google is guessing. That the machine is out there, and it's saying, well, if I can find an author and I'm pretty confident, then obviously I can attribute it. But if I can't find an author, I will guess. And if I'm reasonably confident, I can attribute it to that. And Bill Slawski talked a lot about author vectors, which means that it can read your content and it can analyze whether you wrote it or I wrote it. And if you sign one of my articles, Google can theoretically figure out that we've cheated, that I wrote the article and you put your name on it, because it recognizes my style.
Got it. Very, very interesting. I still have one question regarding the structured data and semantic SEO, if you will, because you said that there's no, say, need to use structured data to become a recognized entity within the knowledge graph, and you can manipulate that your information, your entity information, let's say, without structured data. But I'm seeing a lot of work around structured data. How does that fit into all this new and modern SEO? Because I saw you interviewing a few guys on your podcast as well. I saw you talking quite a bit about structured data, how important it is for us to use it nowadays without thinking just about the knowledge graph, but in a way that helps Google understand our content. Is it essential? Do I need to put a lot of effort into building a nice structured data for my article pages, for my organization, for my authors? How How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because it clarifies something. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying it isn't strictly necessary. You don't need it. It's also something I say about Wikipedia. You don't need Wikipedia for a knowledge panel. If you have Wikipedia, that's great. But people think I hate Wikipedia because I keep telling them don't bother with Wikipedia. But I don't hate Wikipedia. I just say you don't need it. Why go through all that trouble if you don't need it, unless it's for your ego? But back to schema markup, it is hugely important, and it's hugely important because Google is giving you the carrot by saying you will get all of these rich elements in the SERPs, and we will explain to you how to do your corporation schema markup, and we will give you additional bonuses. So what Google is doing is feeding us carrots to get us to implement schema markup because it needs it to ensure, that the machine is confident it's understood the content of the page, whatever page it might be. Because when it reads the page, it's understood the page. If you add schema markup, it's sure that it's understood the page because you've just confirmed it in Google's native language. So it is very important because it builds confidence. It's simply, in our particular case with the entity home, it's not strictly necessary, but I would advise you to do it anyway because it is hugely helpful. So Kalicube Pro, the platform, generates the right schema markup, the ones that we know work. So we don't tell our clients don't use it. We provide them with a schema markup that will work on their entity home.
Very, very interesting that. And my last question regarding the connection between the Killer Whale update. I managed to do it right now. And the helpful content
right at the
update.
End.
Yes. And the helpful content update of September. I didn't know the connection, but I was going to ask you about that because regarding that, I saw a lot Mary Haynes and Glenn Gabe talking about how they noticed the influence of UX or user experience within the impact of the helpful content update. So you clearly said that the authors played an important role. So clearly Google is trying to understand who's writing the content to see if that content is going to be useful for the users and so on.
Yeah.
But what's your take in this UX approach? Where does the user experience of a page, of a website fits into the N.E.E.T.T score here?
Right, yeah, which is a great question. It's the user experience is obviously hugely important. I mean, what I would always say is when somebody comes to your website, you should be solving their problem. And if you solve their problem, then they bounce out again. As long as they don't search for the same thing again, Google will see that you've solved the problem. So the pogo sticking idea is not actually a problem unless people are going back and forth between different answers. The best way to demonstrate to Google that you have solved the problem and have engaged the user is by having a next step for the user on every single page. Keep them moving through your website. I mean, we all say this all of the time, but what we're doing at Kalicube now is considering that every single page on the website is a pseudo landing page. That should always be a next step. And that's an interesting point. We need to decide what that next step is. And if we look at that, in fact, as business owners, we need to be more decisive. People from Google, like John Mueller, say, don't make Google guess. I mean, 100%. And that's what we're doing at Kalicube is we're stating the facts, making sure that those implicit semantics corroborate and confirm what Google understands. We're ensuring it isn't even starting to guess because it's all so clear. But it also goes for everything in your website. Google needs you to lead the way and show Google which pages are important, which pages it should be focusing on for which particular need or problem that you can solve. It's up to us to stand up and say, well, this is the page, that one, this page, that page, that page, this image, that video, and that goes for users too. And I think one huge weakness in digital marketing in general is people aren't decisive enough about what they're showing, to whom, and what the next step is. And it's absolutely huge, and it's a huge hole in most of our digital marketing, including Kalicube, and we're putting that right now. And we're going to add it to the Kalicube process, so the Kalicube process becomes just that little bit better.
Oh, that's amazing, Jason. My mind is blown away for this talk. I expected a lot for talking with you, but no less than that. It's just like this just became. As you were talking here, I was just I'm just going to use our chat here to see this is SEO in 2024 and beyond, guys. This is what you have to focus on. Forget about AI, forget about link building or so on. This summarizes like the way I've been seeing SEO, but now as clear as it should be. The NEET, I'm going to call the NEET score. So to sum things up, or the NEET score for me is what you need to focus on these little letters, N.E.E.A.T.T, and work on those. And that's because in each one of them, you do have to work a little bit like a technical SEO side of things, or link building, or better content, build topical authority. The NEET just summarizes what SEO is all about. Man, this has been an incredible chat. I would like to ask you for your final words in terms of like, if you were to summarize or give some tips for our SEO community here in Brazil regarding SEO in 2004 and beyond, what would you say? What should they focus on?
Yeah, I would love to come back to what I said much earlier, which is the Conecte process is, for me, the future of digital marketing, let alone SEO. But it includes SEO. But despite the fact I come from an SEO world, I'm a marketer, not an SEO now. I just happen to know a lot about SEO. So what I focus on with all of the clients that we have at Conecte, and what we encourage the agencies who use the Conecte process platform to do, is within a digital marketing strategy, educate Google, learn from Google, build your digital strategy based on branding first, marketing second, and just package it all up for Google and Bing as a bonus.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of a post from Jess Shows on Twitter or X. She said, I don't recall, if you master Google Knowledge Graph, you understand Google's brain. If you understand the language language models, you know how Google talks. And it was three things that was like summarizing what you said. I'm going to recall this, guys, and I'll send it to you as well. And I put it on the description of our video here. But I think she's summarizing 3 topics, which I love her work as well. For me, Jess Shows is one of the references in the SEO world, like you, Jason. I've seen the 2 talks from her, 3 talks in Search Love, 3 years in a row. She's fantastic. I just love. The last time I saw her, she was doing that. She's like 3 years ahead of us every time I talk with her. It's like, I think the last year in Search Love, she did a talk about Google ecosystems. Like, as you said it, you need to think about universal search. You need to think about being present in all the different ecosystems that Google offered to you, from Google My Business to News to every platform that you have available. You need to optimize for that. And that 2 years ago, I said, that blew my mind. And talking with you was the same level of talk. Like, you started talking that Conecte was 8 years ahead of Google. And now Google is catching up to you guys. I can't wait to see what comes in the future from Conecte and from the Brand SERP Guy.
Yeah, brilliant. No, absolutely. I mean, I'm really interested to figure out how Conecte can stay ahead of Google and stay ahead of the rest of the industry. And that's what I love coming back to the Conecte team, is we have a huge number of people working in marketing. And what we then do is take that, create SOPs, standard operating procedures. We create vanilla standard operating procedures, and then they become part of the Conecte process that we sell to our clients. And that means that we're all building the product, and we're all making sure that Conecte stays way ahead of the competition. And my analysis, and Elise's analysis now, as she takes over Conecte Pro, of Google's knowledge graph and Google SERPs, is helping us to see where Google is going, what Google is doing, understand, as Jez says, how it thinks, how it talks. And there must be a third one, but I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, I think it was ranked brain, knowledge graphs, and language models.
Well, how it
I think ranked brain is the brain, the knowledge graph, how it correlates things, and language models, how Google talks. It was such a simple post that kind of like said, she nailed it. She says her understanding of the whole ecosystem that we work, like you, it's unbelievable. So
I love that. That's great.
So yeah, Jess, if you're seeing that, I would love to have you on the show, but I'll reach out to you and so on. But Jason, thank you very much for your time. once again, it's been amazing talking with you. I hope to see you around in events in Europe sometime soon. Too. So I should be in Amsterdam, in Eindhoven with Alex Tachalova in her event in the 31st of March. But I'll be around. So yeah, we'll hopefully to see you sometime soon. And thank you very much for your knowledge and all your expertise.
Well, thank you very much for the questions. They got all of the best stuff out of me, which is delightful.
Great. Pessoal, foi isso então, mais um episódio aqui no Don't Panic, It's Organic. Espero que vocês tenham gostado. Todas as informações do Jason vão estar aqui na descrição. Não esqueça de seguir o canal e ativar as notificações para vocês ficarem ligados nos próximos vídeos. E até mais. Jason, thank you very much and see you soon, man.